Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/new music industry. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player.
You're listening to the New Music Industry with David Andrew Weeb.
You know, I often say to our podcast guests, just pretend like the conversation we're about to have is a casual chat over coffee. But that's literally what happened with today's guests. Once we got going, I just threw the questions out the window. I very much enjoyed connecting with Tommy Z, and I think you will enjoy the conversation we had as well. So let's get into it.
So let me tell you why I contacted you.
Absolutely.
Because I really like your vibe, you know, as far as you seem like the kind of guy who's definitely putting the word resourceful into work. You're doing all sorts of things. You're involved in all sorts of things. And now as I'm connecting with all of these folks online who I'm basically telling my story to, and, you know, in my hope that I can show musicians a way maybe that they have not considered to make some money with their music, it was hard to sort of ignore your presence online, you know, and I thought you're kind of like the perfect guy to reach out to because you're definitely the resource for musicians to show them not just one way, not just two ways, but any given way that actually might work because everybody's different. There's a myriad of ways to earn a living as a musician today. And that's what I was attracted to you by, your ability to be able to clearly articulate all of that. So I'm thankful that we're here now.
I appreciate that. Thank you. You're right. I mean, I've focused on the content side of things very heavily. My business reached a plateau, which is why I'm transforming it. I'm turning it into something a little bit different than it used to be in terms of monetization. But I hope that in terms of the impact and change that I've been able to create something that's lasting and tangible for musicians.
Yeah, I know exactly how you feel because, you know, you can always make a little bit of money here and there with, let's say, a digital product or some kind of product online, but it always dries up in the end. And the only thing that can keep going is actually seeing that you're actually making a difference in people's life and that you're able to price your knowledge or wisdom or products or services in a way that allows people to get transformed by what you're doing and allows you to keep doing that, you know? I mean, that's to me the attraction of the time that we're living now, is that anyone who has a story, kind of knowledge, experience, wisdom, can appear online, share it with others, see who resonates with that, and then actually, you know, possibly earn a pretty decent living off of sharing that knowledge. I'm really attracted by that, you know, as opposed to just getting paid for my time. I create music for commercials. So I'm doing both right now, actually, and it's quite new to me, to be honest, to be talking with you, to be talking to guys like Graham Cochran on Recording Revolution. But I'm really enjoying it because I am stuck, you know, in like my studio in this world that really not nobody, but very few know about. And like we all know each other within our business, making good brands. But the wider sort of population of musicians, very few of them have a clue. They think it's sync or they think it's like library music, you know, something like that. So when I actually went out there and started sharing the story, it's like crazy how many people are mailing me, asking me about this world. And it's quite actually like refreshing for me to be able to help an individual, you know, as opposed to make a song for some cleaning detergent, which is lucrative, don't get me wrong, but I've been doing it over a decade, you know, so it's kind of like if you think about life and how, according to my best knowledge, you only live once, it kind of feels good to be able to sort of, you know, build a tribe of people who you know you're impacting directly, and they're actually willing to pay you for that.
Yeah.
it's fascinating to me, man. It's really fascinating, and it's kind of like the perfect scenario. Like, you're helping someone, they see value in what you're doing, they give you money, you get doing it. It's beautiful.
It's funny because like I almost walked away from it. I was thinking like, I know personal development, I know marketing. Maybe I should get into those spaces.
Yeah.
Maybe they would be more lucrative. Maybe I could establish myself in those niches instead. And I think what made a difference for me, or at least one of the things, was going to the DIY musician conference in Austin earlier this year in August. And I just realized that these were my people.
Yes.
So
Yes.
often in Calgary, I would get a dead stare or a dead look or like deer in headlights kind of look if I even talked about like ebooks or online marketing or authoring books or any of that. They're just like, does that make any money? Or they change the subject or whatever it was. But I went to the conference and it was completely different reception. They would look at my book and go, oh, I can see that's kind of Seth Godin inspired. And I'd be like, you get it. You get something that a lot of people just don't get. And I think my heart opened again. I wanted to begin embracing my creative side. I realized that I was not meant to be some kind of business titan. I'm meant to be more of like a creative coach or a creative helper, a creative mentor. And I think that's where I can make the biggest difference. And that's why I'm writing more music again and releasing more music again too.
Yeah, I mean, look, man, I always look at living life from a macro and micro perspective. It's the same thing when you're making music. You got to sort of zoom out, go, is this thing working? You know, and then go back to fiddling the hi-hat, you know?
Yeah.
Same with life. You got to wake up every day and go, is my life working? Like, you know, if I got hit by a streetcar today, could I lay under the streetcar and go, okay, I guess game over, but like, how did I do, you know? If you can do that, zoom out, lay under a streetcar and go, I'm making music, I'm having a good time, I'm able to pay my rent, check, good, then that's the most important thing, you know? Sometimes we live in the micro thing, which is like money pressure, gotta make the money. So then you start thinking up these schemes that aren't even you. Like, I'm going to go out and join the personal development space because obviously you're a smart guy. Obviously you understand promotion, marketing, and the huge bucks are over there, right? I mean, the amount of money you can charge for these personal development programs are incredible.
Oh, yeah.
But it's not you necessarily, right? And I've had the same thing, you know. I've been frustrated with advertising industry a few times because, let's face it, like when you're working on a campaign for dish soap, and they're really grinding you, like you're on the 47th revision of a track you don't even like. Say to yourself, Jesus, like, what am I doing with my life, you know? And sure, I'm getting paid, but it really feels like I'm just being a slave to some corporate committee that doesn't even understand music and et cetera, et cetera. But when I wake up the next day and I have sober moments of reflection, I go, dude, this is your story. Like, you couldn't be just 100% artist. You couldn't be just 100% corporate guy, because I used to be that guy. I used to be a banker. So you're right where you belong, man. You're between the music and the business.
Yep.
And you get to do some crafting, but not 100%, which is fine. And you get to do some businessy stuff, but not 100%, which is perfect. Because if you had to do 100% of either of these, you'd get probably frustrated or bored. So, you know, it's funny. If you take a look at your life, a lot of people are right where they belong. They just refuse to acknowledge that, you know?
Yeah.
Your thing, right?
So
it's like,
true.
it's no accident that you're exactly where you are. And maybe if you accept that and go with it, you will start driving without your handbrake on. Otherwise, you know, you might overthink stuff and just get into this analysis paralysis mode and not even achieve humble results wherever the hell you are, because you're constantly doubting, constantly thinking, constantly grass is greener. Like, grass is greener wherever you water it. I think Gary Vaynerchuk said that, or one of those smart guys online. And I think it's very true. Grass is greener wherever you water it, right?
I think you just summarized the book that's been in development for way too long called Flashes of Elation, which is about sensitive creatives. That's going to be coming out, but it's not going to be the next book. It'll probably be the one after the next one that I'm releasing, which I'm planning to call the Music Entrepreneur Code. And I think it's just a much needed resource in the space right now. There's got to be someone that can simplify all this, because I see people in the music entrepreneur space that have, so many different spokes to their music entrepreneur concept, and I'm going like, that's going to be overwhelming at the best of times for anybody to try to do that. We need a way to just dumb this way down, keep it simple. And just get people motivated, inspired to do it. Never mind, try to figure out all the details all at once, right? So, and I also relate to what you said about, the 47th revision. I mean, I've had my finger in a lot of different things, as you said. So I've done some studio recording before as a producer engineer. And I remember the first time this happened, where a client was just like, okay, so we need to boost the bass. Okay, so you need to take out this section. Could you edit that out? Okay, we're going to need to layer the guitars again. So let's layer the guitars all over. It needs more reverb. And now we're going to have to do some extra vocal tracking. So we're going to do even more vocal tracking on top of the tracking we've already done. And I was like, are you kidding me? And then I had this moment, as a business person, where I was like, oh, but I'm just getting paid more to do this. So the longer we sit here working on this, ultimately, the better my pocketbook looks. So I wanted to be in a capacity where I'm still serving them. At the same time, it was also a realization that, okay, longer I sit here, the more money I make.
Yeah, and, I always say there's a difference between being an artist and being an artisan. An artisan, a.k.a. craftsperson, is somebody who is paid to do something for somebody else. There's no need to get precious. There's no need to get pretty. There's no need to get emotional. You're like a paid assassin. You go in there, you put on a pro face. More guitar? Sure, more guitar. Are you not afraid there's too much guitars? No, the client says, I'm not afraid. Okay, you're paying me. And that's being an artisan. That's being a craftsperson. When you're an artist, you have complete freedom. You can do whatever you want because nobody's really paying you. It's your creative freedom. You're doing whatever you want. And that's the difference, I think. And a lot of people have trouble switching mindsets. Like, they walk into a craftsperson situation as an artist, forgetting that when you're a craftsperson, there's a committee. There's money, but there's also a committee. That money didn't come from, that money came from, let's say, somebody who's let's say a business, right? Somebody who's generating money, who owes their shareholders something, who needs to basically be accountable for the money they spend, and they need to earn the money. And a lot of musicians don't really get that business part, that you're here to perform in exchange for certain money. And if you can separate your ego and your emotions from all of that, then actually, objectively speaking, it's not such a bad way to make a living, man. You're in the studio, you're dealing on the mixing board, you're tweaking some knobs. Or me, I'm making some music for some brand. Are they frustrating sometimes? Yes. Do I do revisions that I don't believe in as a craftsperson? Yes. But is there a trade-off? Absolutely. I'm getting paid more than I would had I done everything myself, released it out into the world, and then what? Nobody's waiting for it. So unless I put in thousands of hours in promoting my stuff, then maybe I have hopes of generating some income. But it's a very clear distinction for me, and that's something that I try to teach people that come onto my path, is the mentality of a craftsperson is very different from the mentality of the artist. And I actually work with a lot of artists who are 100% artists, in the sense that they never compromise their artistic integrity. They're putting out records, they're writing the songs they want, but when they need money, because their albums or their streams are not always a reliable source of income, they come and do a few commercial campaigns. And a lot of these guys are smart, like the professional guys, the guys who've been at it for a while. They know exactly like what's happening when they're commissioned to, let's say, write a song for some brand. And it's beautiful to see. I'm talking about the younger guys, like the guys who are still sort of maybe, and girls who are learning. Maybe they're still idealistic. There's nothing wrong with being idealistic. I think it's a good thing to have.
Yeah.
But I think it's also good sort of put things into categories in your brain, and without compromising your integrity as a human being or as an artist, to be able to say, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this for money. So I accept the pros and cons of that. And if my soul is calling me not just to do things for other people, I'm going to create a personal project and do that, and nobody can tell me nothing. I've been talking for a really long time, and I hope I made a little bit of sense there.
No, it's really powerful what you said. I think if most musicians just got that, they would be much further along in the sense that, I just did a fairly sarcastic rant on the podcast about record label owners or people who are wanting to start a record label, saying, I have $1 million. How would you advise I spend my marketing budget?
You have guys like that? I would love to get in touch with them.
Yeah, absolutely. But I guess the source of the sarcasm was just that, look, their question was so vague, right? They didn't say anything about their target audience or who was on their label or what genre of music they were going to represent or any of that. So that's where this whole, I guess my friend called it angst. Yeah, that's kind of the angsty approach came from. Was from this realization that, these could just be tire kickers, right? They're just coming to me going like, how would you do this to see if I'm any good, right? I was just going to say, like, I still went on to answer that question, and I still offered some good tips, but I said, without knowing who your target audience is or who's signed to your label or what music you're representing, this is all I can do for you,
Yeah, there's always been this kind of marriage between money guys and the artists. You notice that? Like, music business was built on that. You had the managers and you had the artists. Andy Warhol, I was reading his biography recently. He blew up, after surrounding himself with a good manager and making a decision to blow up. So, if there are guys who have $1 million and, they're smart business-wise, it might be interesting for a musician to think about pairing up with somebody like this. Mm-hmm. But you have to understand that money is not free ever. Like, you might be freer working at Starbucks and just meeting your bills, being able to pay your bills, than accepting some investment from somebody who's never going to give you money for free. There's an expectation. They'll want to own a large share of your life, your catalog of your time. And I've had a few of these opportunities personally where somebody said, I'm going to invest in your company, in your music production company. We're going to go out there and make music for brands. We're going to be great. And I just refused because I realized I actually didn't need anybody's money in order to do what I do. Like, I can go and get the project myself. Right? And from the revenue of those projects, I pay all of my expenses, which means I'm 100% owner of everything that I do. If I wanted to buy a factory and create widgets, T-shirts, I don't know, tires, whatever, then I would not be able to do that. I would need capital investment, like a large sum of money to do this. So then I might consider an investor. But to create music, to hire composers to and produce and oversee them, to go into advertising agencies and to get these campaigns by, schmoozing the creative directors and buying them overpriced sushi lunches, I don't need an investor for that. And if I had an investor, they would take 30% of everything I make or whatever, and it's just not good business for me. Mm-hmm. So you got to be really careful with that.
Yeah, I think Rick Barker recently went on to explain sort of the difference between music industry and music business, and how he explained it was music industry is the big players, the big labels, the distributors, the PROs, and so forth. And then you have the music businesses, which represents us, the smaller or medium-sized businesses that are out there providing a valuable service. And if you want to do business with a music business, you have to expect to pay money. It's just how it works. This is how we make our living, right? You make money as a music producer. I make money as a content creator and resource provider and a coach. So, yeah. People have to have that expectation that they're going to pay for that.
The onus is on me to prove my value in the marketplace as a music producer when I make music for commercials or brands. And also, if I decide to, like I'm doing now, teach other musicians how to break into the business, I have to create something that musicians deem worthwhile, that is actually giving them transformation results or information that they can't readily access anywhere else, or else you don't belong in the market. You know, it's like, and I love that that sort of democracy of what the internet has done. And I know it's been said over and over again, but it's really true, man. You don't need much to go out there and reach people and then see if whatever it is that you're reaching people with is resonating. I had the same thing. Like, I've been doing ads for over a decade, okay? In Canada, this is where my career started. Then I moved to Amsterdam for 5 years. And at one point I thought, every time I do a lecture, like every time I do a keynote, I'm just having a lot of fun. Like, a lot of musicians are coming up to me. They're like, oh my God, I never knew that you could actually make money doing this. Like, that there are people making a living or a full-time career doing this. And I was like, you know what? That's true, man. Like, how many people actually know about it? Because before I got into it, I was thinking that remixing, licensing my track to some compilations, this is in 2005, DJing, and maybe once in a while, like getting paid to do a remix is the way that you make a living as a musician. And it wasn't until I actually, got asked to create music for some brands that it was like, really? Like, this is the kind of money that you could make just writing music for a commercial? This is crazy, right? So then when I started sharing that story, I had to remind myself that I was the same way. Like, when I entered the business, I was like, really? This world exists? Like, I thought you got to slug it out trying to get a record deal, or selling your singles, or licensing them to comps around the world, or getting to know people at labels so you can do remixes, which is still a viable way to make a living. But let's face it, the things have changed a little bit. And not so many labels are willing to pay you as good money as they would back in the day for a remix. Or let's just say that, unless you're getting millions of streams, it's probably not a reliable way to estimate or to guarantee some kind of a stable income, right? So,
and it's more competitive than it used to be too, and that's another thing that musicians are having to face. There was a lot of talk about licensing and placements, and I know people can still make really good money at it. The difference now is there's more and more people that are growing wise to that. But I do feel that the fascination with streaming platforms and Spotify is somewhat inordinate. Like, if you can go and buy a cheap course or ebook and read about it and get some information on it, great. I don't have one. I think a lot of other smart entrepreneurs do. But the thing is that I think unless, like you said, unless you're getting millions of streams or something like that, it's not going to amount to much. I think where the money is, and it has always been or has been for at least the last 2 decades, is in your list. That's the best place to build your following, is in your email list. And if you can grow that, then you have a database of people you can reach out to whenever you have something new. And those will be the first people to buy, stream, and do whatever it is that you want them to do.
Yeah. But you know what the problem with there is unless you have a product that's priced high enough, you just don't get enough out of that list
Yeah.
in order to satisfy your let's say maybe basic business revenue goals. I mean, you'd really have to. I'll give you an example. Like my wife, she writes crime fiction, and she's a published author. She's on her third book now, and we're not going to retire on her income, on her sales income, especially after she's signed with a big publisher now. They take most of the royalties. But I'm always like, when I look at it objectively and we're eating supper together and she's complaining about, not getting enough exposure from the media or the Instagram posts not doing enough damage, I'm like, man, I don't envy you, my wife. You know why? Because at the end of the day, your product is like 10 euros.
Yep.
So even if you reach, like you need a massive audience in order to see some kind of meaningful numbers from it, Like the way I put food on the table is I earn a very good commission for creating music for a commercial. I don't always create the music. I'm a music producer, which means I don't always make the music, but I make the music happen. So sometimes I do it, but once in a while, let's say I have to do an orchestral score, I will reach out to a specialist, somebody who's amazing, somebody who I trust and love. And so I give them the project. Maybe I find another guy, so I have 3 options or so. They deliver. But I'm responsible for the entire portion of the campaign. So I get one chunk sum of money from the advertising agency or the brand. So, instead of having a mass audience, I go after businesses to pay me a commission in order to create some art on their behalf. And this is what I call like going back to Bach. Because Bach was a musician and he spent his whole life as a musician. He never had a day job, right? Never had a side job, never had nothing. Like from morning till night, Bach made all of his income from music, right? And sometimes it was income from patrons who paid him, commissioned him to create a piece of music for them. And other times, maybe the church paid him to be the organist, right?
Yeah.
So today, what I see is that we no longer have kings and churches as patrons of musicians and of art, but today those patrons are brands, so businesses.
Yes.
Like, where are you going to go and find someone to pay you thousands of dollars to create a track? My best guess, and it's not even a guess because I'm actually doing it, and I've been doing it for a decade, is brands. I mean, they spend billions on content, right? Because they have to keep us, the audience, emotionally moved and just boiling with desire to buy the latest Nike shoe or to get the latest MacBook. And it's a kind of a black magic that these brands do by having really sexy music, visuals, and these stories that are just like, they just grab you, right? Like the great brands know exactly how to do this. So to me, it's sort of the clear path, like being back to Bach. But instead of going to church for your money or to the king so that, you can write a piece of music for them, you go to brands and they pay you to be an artist. So that's kind of how I see, mind you, I'm stuck in this world. So I don't have as wide of a view as you do. I don't concentrate on royalties. I don't concentrate on record deals. I don't give a shit about radio play. I don't give a shit about record sales. I don't care about selling singles for pennies. To me, people are streaming music for free. If you can embrace that reality, then maybe we can figure out a new way. But like hoping that you can live off of, selling singles for pennies, that would really scare the shit out of me if I was trying to make it as an artist.
Well, that's what you got to be mindful of for sure. I wouldn't want to be the musician that was selling the single for 69 cents and then the album for 9.99. I think what happens is musicians assume they're selling to musicians, right? So they have
Right.
just as much money as they do, which is not true. There's a lot of consumers out there. I know like women 25 to 35, just from my observation, spend sometimes $300, $400, $500 a day on different things. And,
Yeah.
there's just much greater opportunity. So I'm often going, where's your bundle? Where are your packages? Where can I go to buy your entire catalog? And they're going, what? And I say, yeah, charge $100 for your entire catalog. Charge $1,000 for the next 5 performances, so a venue can book you 10 times or 5 times instead of just once. Where's your tour package? Like, I don't see any of this stuff on your website, and so you don't have a higher priced offer than something that's $9.99. Do you see how that doesn't make any sense?
Yeah.
So-
Like, how could you? Every time I went to a coffee shop recently, and the lady that was running it was everything was so beautiful. Like, she was baking pies on the spot, and the pie was the best pie I ever had, and the cappuccino was the best cappuccino I ever had. So I started talking to her because I do enjoy these one-off things. As much as I love Starbucks, it's like I'll give Starbucks one thing. It's like a pretty reliable experience, given the fact that there's a billion of them around the world. So I'm not going to hate on Starbucks, because if I need a grande bold, that's where I go. I just like my coffee bold. I sometimes don't want a bar drink. I just want a dark coffee with some crazy cream in there. And if I'm in Warsaw, or if I'm in Amsterdam, or if I'm in Toronto, it's the same grande bold, man.
Yes.
And it's beautiful. But I also do enjoy these unique one-off things, because there is no template there. There's no process. There is no franchise there. It's basically the authorship of this woman. And so I'm curious, like, what is this? Why did you get into this? Because you like baking cake. Why are you doing this? And I don't know how many times I've heard this story, but in different versions. But basically, I see the face go kind of like neutral to sad, and go, I actually put a lot of money into this place, and it's just, I got to keep putting in money, like there's just not enough money being generated for it to be lucrative. And she goes, I'm like, well, your passion is also baking, isn't it? She's like, I guess, but I really got into this for money. And I always sort of think to myself, really? Like, how many people in this small cafe with like 3 tables did you expect to have every day, generating how much revenue? Like, even if you look at the broad strokes, you start seeing trouble already. Like, how could you expect selling coffees and cakes to be lucrative? Like, it's never going to be lucrative. You can't fit 1 million people inside of your cafe every single day. And so I just I'm amazed to see that people sometimes can't step back and just look at the raw mechanics of whatever thing they're proposing to be a business. And it's the same for musicians. It's like, if your single sells for 69 cents, how many of them do you actually have to sell in order to generate a good enough revenue? And if you make that calculation, and a lot of the times people will go, really? I have to reach that many people? Well, yeah. Like, what did you expect? You have to reach that many people. So I'm a big fan of simplicity and just looking at raw mechanics of every situation. And if you open a cafe to bake cake because it's your passion, that's one thing. But if you say, oh, I was hoping it'd be lucrative, it never promised to be that.
Yeah. I've never been accused of not being able to identify revenue streams within a business. In fact, I've gotten compliments from people who've looked at my business plans and they've gone, wow, you sure know your way around monetization. And I say, yeah, because I like to think about that kind of stuff. It doesn't mean I love to do all of it. It just means that I've identified some things that work, and having lower priced offers, but also higher priced offers and medium tier offers. It's all very important, and people are forcing people through funnels more than ever, but I just see that it should be like a chocolate wheel where, they're spokes of every department, and the customer is forwarded to the appropriate department at the appropriate time. Not force people through $17, $37, $67. Someone might just want your $67 offer. Give them the opportunity to get there first, right? Instead of having to go through buying your multiple offers. So,
yeah. How much of that are you doing these days? Like, because I can imagine like a lot of musicians have this sort of narrow view of like, I got to sell my single.
Mm-hmm.
So like, how much leeway do you really have to open up their world and sort of open their horizon and
it's really their willingness to invest in themselves first and foremost, because they think when they're purchasing my time as a coach, they're giving me money. And I say, you're actually just investing in yourself. I'm reflecting back to you your own thoughts. And that's what a good coach does. And I also ask good questions. That's another thing a good coach does. And I think it is tough, right? Artists are sometimes stubborn, or sometimes want their own way, or sometimes don't want to try things outside of what they're already doing. But once that's reflected back to them, sometimes they begin to see their own insanity. It's like, I've noticed this with myself. If I stay in my own insanity long enough, I see the issue with it, and then I'm like, oh, I have access to a different way of doing things now. But a lot of people don't stay in that insanity long enough. They'll change the subject. They'll try to talk about something else or get into something. And I say, no, stay where you are. And they're like, well, I feel bad. And I'm like, I know you feel bad because you're feeling guilt or shame or whatever it is on the inside. Yeah. But if you stick it through and stay in that insanity for a little longer, you might begin to see some things you didn't see before.
You're totally right, man. I'll tell you a little story that relates to that. When I used to be a banker on Bay Street in Toronto, working for Toronto Dominion Bank. And it's basically like what I was doing while I was DJing and producing. So it was like my safe day job. After I finished university, I didn't know what I could do, and I never trusted that I could be a musician full time. So I got into this day job, and initially it was great because like you kind of ride off of that novelty of wearing a suit, having a fancy business card, and traveling to one of the Black Towers downtown Toronto in a fast elevator, having your own cubicle. You kind of like try to live that, and enjoy that. And I guess I enjoyed it for a little bit, but I had this double life where by day I was doing that, and by night I was DJing at Toronto clubs and doing these remixes and putting out music. And I started getting slowly dissatisfied, and just totally that day job started becoming very dissonant, as in the novelty wore off. And now I was just seeing people in a conference room using big words that really weren't getting anywhere. They were just using them to sort of keep everyone asleep and keep everyone comfortable. But I noticed that it was kind of a substitute for real thinking or real commitment, or just using big words. And so as I started getting dissatisfied, and I was going in there on like 4 hours of sleep, because Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday nights I had residencies in all these Toronto clubs. So I'd basically show up at work on Friday after having 4 hours of sleep, and in the morning meeting I'd already be cranky. And we had guys like Bob basically saying, we have to ensure we maximize shareholder value, realize all the available synergies. I'm like, Bob, if you could just specify what you mean by that, that would be fantastic. Because what you just said is meaningless.
Yeah.
Obviously, nobody's trying to take away shareholder value. Nobody's trying to run away from synergies if they exist. But you just said something that everyone's nodding their head to, but like nobody's really questioning or challenging it, like saying, what do you actually mean by that? And I started doing that. Not because I cared, but because I was cranky and just sort of like losing the end of my patience, right? So I thought they were going to like fire my ass, But instead, I started getting promoted. They're like, dude, this dude is leadership potential. We just love how he cuts through the clutter. Occam's razor, just boiling it down to the essentials. We love this guy. So I started getting promoted in a
Nice.
place I felt I didn't belong. And so now I'm getting to the point where I connect to what you were saying.
Yeah.
3-4 years into that job, I was really feeling the pain, the chaos of my situation, a total dissatisfaction with my status quo. Like, just not feeling like I'm in control of my life, and accepting the promotions and getting the pay raise, having a business card that's huge. Like, and everyone's sort of cheering me on, my family, because what else could I do? I mean, it's great. I got a job at a major financial institution. I got investments. I got all these packages, employee packages. Fantastic. But I knew I didn't belong. So I felt out of control. And I remember having a phone call with the guy that I was making music with at the time. Kind of like my studio partner. We made music together. It was fantastic. And I remember saying to him, like, it's been like years, like 2 years probably, where I'm just going to work, but I feel dissatisfied. And I'm feeling this pain and this tension well up inside of me. Because I know, according to my best knowledge, you only live once. And like, life is just passing me by, man. And I see zero indication that I'm ever going to make music my full-time income. Like, I'm not doing enough to make that happen. And I remember the pain and that dissatisfaction and that tension welled up so hard that I just snapped. Like, I just snapped and went, you know what? Fuck it. This is it. I'm going after music as a full-time career.
Right.
And the reason why I bring this up is because had I not lived with that tension and had not acknowledged it and had not let that tension actually spill over or like rise up to my consciousness and really like make me aware of how painful it is, the situation I'm in right now, I would have never made a decision that actually stuck. Because I've made lots of rational decisions in my life, in my head, but they didn't have the sticking power. Well, you actually acknowledge the pain and the bullshit and all the things that are wrong with your situation, as it is objectively, don't run from it. It can really be a powerful motivator to say, I am in deep shit, and you can't actually start changing unless you first acknowledge where you are. So
I love that. Thanks for sharing that. It's such a great story. You know, to relate to it a little bit, in 2014, I mean, I had a bunch of niche blogs at the time in addition to the Music Entrepreneur HQ, and was just experimenting, trying different things. One of the things I was looking to establish was a content provider. So like writing blog posts for corporate, you know, for businesses and so forth. And, you know, that is what I do to make some of my money these days, either ironically or just because by design. But as I was looking to establish that, we sat down with different people to get their advice and tips, and we talked to web designers and we talked to a studio owner, interestingly enough. And I remember this whole thing about buzzwords that came up. And it was just, you know, throw around terms like ROI and synergy and this, that. I just started laughing. I couldn't help it. I was just laughing uncontrollably. I was like, I mean, you're kind of right, because if I talk to some of the corporate people and mention a bunch of these terms, then maybe they would just sign on and be like, yeah, we need this guy to do our SEO blog synergy optimization boosting campaign or whatever it ends up being. And you know, maybe it would work. But yeah, it doesn't cut through the BS at all. At the end of the day, all you're doing is creating content, and 6 to 12 months from now, hopefully, if you're lucky, it ranks in Google. Like, that's all that's going on.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and you have to always work backwards. Like, again, I bring up the streetcar. Like, start your day with the streetcar test, man. You're laying under a streetcar, and what do you think of your life so far? You know,
yes.
Kind of how I look at it, you know. If I'm laying under the streetcar tonight after this interview, because I didn't look both ways. The first thing I'm going to think about is my family. So, at least that's what I think I'm going to think about. Like, oh man, are they going to be okay? It really sucks that I'm not coming home right now. How will they even find out what's going to happen? So that shows you right away, like, you're no longer fooling yourself when you're laying under a streetcar.
Yeah.
So I'm trying, the ancient Romans, is that even a term? There's ancient Greeks, but is there ancient Romans? Anyway, Romans, I think it was like what do they call these? Stoics. The Stoics, I heard that they would actually arrange mock funerals for themselves. So they could actually experience the day of their own passing and like their funeral.
Yes.
And that's where memento mori came from. You remember the fact that you're actually going to die and there's no disputing it. And so they would try to live really pragmatically because of that. So I kind of have this test and, it really cuts through the bullshit. And that is, I'm laying on their streetcar. What do I think about? There's 3 things I think about. First is my family. The second is, where am I going next? And that is, you don't have to be religious, but like a lot of artists are spiritual people. Like they wonder about metaphysical things. Why is there something rather than nothing? Is there something? Are there aliens? Like, I think a lot of artists think about those kind of things because they touch on invisible things. They touch on something more than just the things we see and hear. And that's the role of an artist, is actually to point us beyond something obvious. So that's the second thing I would think about. And that's why I also think a lot about spirituality and about living a good life, because I'm hedging my bets, man. I don't want to go through a door where there might happen to be eternal life, where suddenly, like, I realize that the things that I've done in this life are going to set me back for eternity, So that's the second thing. And keep in mind, this is individual, right? I'm just telling you what I feel or what I think I will think about when I lay on the streetcar. And the third thing, of course, is, was I true to myself? Like, did I listen to my soul? Did I leave the bank when my soul said, you don't belong here? Did I take 2 steps back when I left the bank to take a step forward? Because believe me, I wasn't making anywhere close to the salary I was making at the bank when I left to pursue music full time.
Right.
But I got myself up to that point, because I believe that when you get yourself on the right path where you belong, money is not going to be an issue. Like, it might be, but what's more of an issue is when you're making lots of money and you're unhappy, because that's a way serious problem to fix than like when you put yourself on a path where your talents and the needs of the market align. It's a matter of time before you make the money. I really believe that. If you align your talent with the needs of the market, it's a matter of time. And when you're happy, you don't need to make as much money. I remember this famous engineer. I don't remember his name now. But he's like one of the big guys in the music industry. And I read a lot of these biographies and things like that. And he said, what's funny? He said, I never realized that I was broke because I was having so much fun in the studio. That's not wisdom at the highest level. I don't know what is.
Yeah.
It's that simple truth that when you're having a good time and you feel like you're on the right path, aligned with what you were meant to do in this universe, you simply are happier, more content, and then you don't need to go out, put down a credit card to buy a new pair of shoes or to buy yourself a fancy car, because those are all things that you think will satisfy you, but they don't, man.
Yeah.
What satisfies you is the feeling that you belong in this world and that you're actually blooming and creating the things you're meant to create. I feel like a motivational speaker. I should totally pitch like a $10,000 premium program at the end of this call.
Yeah, absolutely. But the listeners,
because there will be people that actually buy it.
Yeah, the listeners have got to be the one that put the money into that. But leaving Calgary recently, My friend described it as like burning the ships behind me, like no turning back. You have to just keep going. That's kind of how it felt, right? It was just one problem after another with my car, whether it was the car alarm going off and not being able to turn it off, having to get roadside assistance to break into my car because the lock wouldn't open. When I finally arrived in British Columbia, BC area outside of Alberta, then my car just broke down, and then I had to take it to a mechanic, and then it turns out it was the piston, nothing they can do about it. And it was like, okay, what am I going to do? Rent a U-Haul? Rent a car? What's next? And I ended up buying a car, but really long story long, it was just like shedding the old self. That's all. I was moving in the right direction. It was a new chapter in my life. I could feel it. It was like tangible. But I kind of just had to walk through everything. And then, like, the day that I bought the car, I became a BC resident. Everything was done. I got my insurance. I got my registration. I got my new license. I'm a BC resident now. It all just happened then and there. And it was, like, not expected, but I shedded the old self, and I'm here, you know?
You know what? I feel like the universe has a way of testing you when you decide to make a commitment, almost to see if you're serious. Like when I decided to create a masterclass and to actually try my hand at being a mentor online and like actually selling this thing to people, it was kind of a weird experience for me, man. Maybe not for you because you've been doing it. You've been pitching stuff for a while. But to me, it was like, I have no problem taking money from brands. Big money. Like I have zero sensitivity around that because they got billions of dollars to spend. But when I have individuals telling me that they have to save up to get into my course, or that could you please create an installment plan, and like that really hit me. I was like, man, I'm really dealing with like real human beings now. It's no longer like, and I don't want to turn into one of those cynical online entrepreneur guys who are just happy to make all the sales and will never actually respond to their students. Like you can't get at them unless you pay like some crazy amount of money to have like, I don't know, access to them, you know? And so when I got onto this road, I had to overcome all of these sort of blocks, like mindset blocks, one, but two, like my technology was crapping out. I couldn't record an interview properly. My computer was crashing when I was trying to edit a module in the course. And I was just like, oh, hell no, man. You're not going to stop me. Like, I decided I'm going to do this. If I have to sit here until 3 a.m. to finish this fucking module, I'm going to do it.
Love it.
You know? Mm-hmm. Which is like a different thing from when I was like 24 and kind of dabbling into stuff. I'm going to make a remix. Did I make a remix? Yeah, I kind of picked at it for a while, but I never finished it, you know? I think it's like a maturing that happens when you commit to your decisions. Your car breaks down, you're like, I'm not turning back. You can do whatever you want, universe, but I'm going to happen to circumstances. It's not just going to be circumstances happening to me, you know?
That's right. I love that. Well, that's a great bit of mindset to add to this conversation, which I guess it's kind of been the whole time. At some point, I just hit the record button, man, because I felt like, let's just let it flow. Let me scrap the questions.
That's all right.
Let me scrap the questions and let's just go for it, which is what we did. But thank you for your time and generosity. Is there anything else that you have in closing?
No, I mean, I'm just happy that we got a chance to meet and to talk, and I think it won't be the last time. If people want to check out what I do, they can go to tommyz.co. That's where you'll find my work that I do for brands and for music commercials. And if you want to learn more about the world of making music for brands, go to makingmusicforbrands.com.
Nice.
And I actually, before we spoke, before we got on this call, I thought I might do something special for your listeners. Oh. If that's something that you want to publish, then I leave it to you as the sort of the CEO of your life and your enterprises.
That's fantastic.
But I thought that if people go to makingmusicforbrands.com/David30, they will get 30% discount on the masterclass, which I'm currently offering. We just went through a pre-sale where I basically had the masterclass at a discounted rate before the course was even made. I went out there. I'm like, who's interested? And I had a number of people to sign up. We actually have 62 students right now in the masterclass, which is quite great. But now the price has gone up to like the regular price. So just for your listeners, if they're interested, once they check out makingmusicforbrands.com, there's like a sales page there. They can see what the curriculum is, everything that we cover. If that's something that interests you and you actually want to go forward with it, go to makingmusicforbrands.com/David30. And that's where you'll have the checkout, which applies this exclusive discount, because I'm not offering any discounts on this masterclass right now, except for whoever hears this interview. So that's that. And if you have any questions, like I said, man, I'm not one of those guys, because I'm just getting started with this mentoring masterclass thing. Mm-hmm. I'm really, like Gary Vaynerchuk says, man, I'm on the heavy grind. I reply to everybody who emails me. Like, I had a guy today email me, and he's like, dude, I didn't get in during the pre-sale, and now I can't afford the class. And he told me, like, he's got problems, financial problems. His mom passed away. He's sick. Like, he had health problems. You know, we're dealing with real human beings, man. It's kind of hard for me to be insensitive to that. Yeah. And he kept apologizing me for the fact that he keeps asking me what he called newbie questions. And when he told me that little bit of a story, because I kind of tried to brush him off after the third email, I was like, you know, this is everything we cover in the masterclass. And he's like, oh, I'm sorry, dude. I really apologize, but you know, I said, you know what? Don't worry about it, man. Whatever help you need, whatever questions you have, just hit me up. Because honestly, man, it's like 30 seconds for me to actually make an impact in somebody's day by writing 3 sentences and steering them in the right direction. And that's sometimes all that's required. So whoever's listening to this, feel free to mail me, contact me. And unless you approach me like a real jerk, which I doubt any of your people would, then you can expect that I will reply to you in some kind of a meaningful way.
That's fantastic. And I mean, I totally know what you mean to kind of answer your earlier question. It's like when I first started selling, I honestly was just going to record a series of audios and sell them for like 99 cents. It's like musicians are familiar with that price, right? And yes. It was weird because pretty soon there were people like, oh my God, this is a cool idea. Where did you come up with this about teaching business and music together? And they wanted me to charge more for it, and they wanted me to do this and that without realizing what the product was, which was like a 30-minute audio. So it's funny how that, but that kind of, it had me rethinking, you know, everything that I was doing to that point, and from there I was able to iterate and actually create things that were worth the money that I was asking for them. But yeah, I think we all start there. It's like awkward to figure out pricing and to know what to charge.
It is awkward.
Yeah.
But you know, I haven't been hesitant to charge premium in my business. Like, I have always charged premium for making music for brands, and I always advise anybody getting into business that you don't want to compete on price.
No.
Seth Godin says this. It's a race to the bottom, and the problem is you might win. And so my philosophy is charge as much as humanly possible, as much as the market will stand, and that will put the pressure on you, hopefully, if you're a good human being, to actually deliver something above and beyond what you're charging. And
like that.
You know, the last few weeks have been really stressful, man, because I'm continuing to create campaigns for brands while I'm doing this masterclass, creating the modules. They keep getting released weekly, and it's way more work than I thought it would be. Like, way more. Like, the editing, the slides, the recording, the backups, the editing. But the whole thing is I'm trying to justify the value way above the price point, you know. And like, I had one guy say under a YouTube video where I think it was the interview with Brian Funk, music production podcast, or Graham Cochran, but he said the course is way too expensive. And I actually wanted to like create a video around that to say, this kind of comment reveals a certain mindset. And it's a mindset that I don't recommend to musicians. Like, there is no such thing as way too expensive. Is $1,000 iPhone way too expensive? Is a Lamborghini way too expensive? Is a box of matches way too expensive? It's got nothing to do with price and what value you perceive and you derive from the offering. There are people paying like heavy thousands of dollars for vinyl on Discogs, which I wouldn't spend $10 on.
Mm-hmm.
So objectively speaking, there's no such thing as way too expensive. And I would encourage every musician to price themselves as high as possible. But you know what you got to do in order to do that? You got to be remarkable. And that's the part that's difficult. Like actually being remarkable, actually being valuable, and actually being so damn valuable that people will not even mention price when it comes to you. And that's the philosophy I would encourage any creative person to have. Don't price yourself low, price yourself high, and figure out how you can justify.
Absolutely. I mean, when it comes to something like a course too, like you could watch a 2 or 3 hour course on Instagram and presto manifesto, you are an expert on Instagram. And some people laugh sort of uncomfortably at that comment, but the reality is there really more than 2 to 3 hours of content to know about Instagram? Not really.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. And you know what? I spent thousands of dollars on courses that teach you about online courses, and I was burned. Like, there is a lot of times when the course is not worth what it promises to be. And I've been a victim of that. But then there are courses which I paid for, which were very expensive, and I found myself really enjoying them and getting the value, and I appreciated the contact between the person who was providing the course and myself. And I think that's kind of where we're moving. Like, in my experience in the online world, I found that the people who actually replied to me or gave me that personal time, I found it like, if that person did that, I was like, you can charge me whatever you want, because I'm feeling as if like we're actually communicating and like, this is real, as opposed to like paying money, big money for a digital file that I download. I email somebody about it, I never hear back, and I just see like them bragging about how many sales they're doing. I think I kind of don't like that about the internet, and I feel like things are kind of moving in a way where it's more about the personal touch and actually hand-holding rather than just leaving someone with a PDF. Or
I totally agree. Yeah, it's not B2B, it's not B2C, it's H to H, human to human.
That's right, man.
Yeah.
I'm going to write that one. I love it.
Nice. All right, great conversation, Tommy. Thank you so much.
Thanks, brother. I appreciate you having me, and let's stay in touch.
Sounds great.
Have you ever noticed how most music entrepreneur methods out there are really overwhelming and confusing? That's why I decided to create the Music Entrepreneur Code, which really boils it all down to just the key points you need to get started and stay started. If you'd like to learn more, go to musicentrepreneurhq.com/code and get on the waiting list right now.
Thank you for listening. Music in this episode was brought to you by Brian Young. Wherever you're listening to this right now, please consider leaving a 5-star review and comment to help us get the word out about the podcast.